So hi everyone. Thank you so much for your interest in my presentation. I'm Xu Yan. I'm currently a research assistant professor from the Open University of Hong Kong. And today we'd like to share with you one of my studies, which is related to Chinese undergraduate students' perceptions of native and non-native English-speaking content teachers and their experiences. In my presentation, I'll spend some time introducing the background and design of the study that I will share with you my findings. First of all, I would like to define the key term in the study, that is English Medium Instruction, or EMI. It is defined as the use of the English language to teach academic subjects in countries where the first language of the majority of the population is not English. EMI is a term that is frequently used in a tertiary setting. And for EMI teachers, they not only need to equip themselves with rich content knowledge, but also need to obtain proficient English level. In some English as a foreign language countries, such as China, EMI teachers are globally recruited, so they might come from different linguistic and cultural backgrounds. In the EMI literature, we might find that EMI teachers' English level characteristics and teaching methods may influence the implementation of EMI instruction, which further affects the effectiveness of EMI education. And students, who are the most important stakeholders in EMI education, may also have their ideal qualities for EMI teachers. So some of them, or most of them, prefer the teachers to be proficient in English level, and they hope the teachers could adopt learner-oriented and interactive teaching methodologies and offer more practical teaching materials to them. However, in the real world, that might not be the case, because in some of the studies, they found that in some of the Asian contexts or regions, the EMI teachers were adopting teacher-dominated approaches in the classroom, and they tried to minimize their interaction with the students because they were not confident about their English level, and they tried to avoid some possible embarrassment that they might encounter when interacting with the students. But if we take a further look at the studies, we might find that most of the existing studies treat all the EMI teachers as one intact group. But like what I just mentioned, they could come from different linguistic and cultural backgrounds. Then it may be likely that they may have different teaching styles, different characteristics, and different English levels. So it might not be fair to generalize all of them within one group and mention that all of them are adopting some kind of teacher-dominated approaches in their classroom. And some of the studies also imply that EMI students might have different attitudes towards the teachers from different linguistic and cultural background. Particularly, they may have different perceptions of the native and non-native English-speaking EMI teachers. The native-non-native dichotomy may not be something new for you, because in the past decades, we may encounter lots of studies trying to explore the students' perceptions of NS and local English language teachers. And in most of these cases, the students might prefer the NS teachers to the local teachers. But this might not be the case in content subject learning and in EMI courses, because some of the studies find that in content subject learning, the students' preference for NS teachers was not so strong. On one hand, they believed that NS teachers could adopt interactive pedagogical approaches and offer practical and updated content knowledge. On the other hand, the courses that are offered by NS teachers could have heavy workload and demanding requirements, and some of them even reported that they found the NS teachers' lack of knowledge of local culture and language. And these findings were quite interesting, and they aroused our curiosity of design this study, which explores and compares Chinese chemistry undergraduate students' perceptions of native English-speaking and local EMI teachers' teaching behavior. There's one research question. What are Chinese undergraduate students' perceptions of native English-speaking EMI teachers and local EMI teachers regarding teaching behavior? Are their perspectives of the two groups of EMI teachers different? This study was adopted or implemented in a first-tier university in China, and we focus on the EMI program, material science, and chemical engineering, because this is one of the most famous and well-known EMI programs in the university and around the country. Within the programs, there were two major groups of EMI teachers: the local or Chinese EMI teachers and those from English-speaking countries. We recruited all the students in the EMI programs as our research participants. So there were 101 students from year 1 to year 4. We administered a questionnaire survey with all the students and conducted a follow-up interview with 12 of them. So for the questionnaire survey, we aim to capture their perceptions of the teaching behavior of the two groups of EMI teachers. And the question items of the survey were developed or adopted from some previous versions of EMI questionnaires. The survey consists of two parts. Part 1 is related to the learner's background information, and part 2 has 17 question items, and 16 of them are 4-point Likert scale items. So we collected the data and we did a factor analysis, and 4 factors were found from the statistical analysis, and we categorized the questionnaire items into these 4 categories, and we also named them as teaching styles, content organization, language issue, and EMI effectiveness. We also investigate the reliability of the questionnaire, and the finding was quite good. There are also 1 multiple choice questions asking students' preference for ECTs and CCTs. So ECT means the native English-speaking chemistry teachers, and CCT means the Chinese chemistry teachers. At the end of the questionnaire, we asked the students whether they would like to participate in a follow-up interview, and 12 of them agreed, so we invited them for the follow-up interview, which aimed to capture more information about their perceptions of the two groups of teachers, and we also rely on their input in the questionnaires and ask them what you would like to rate the two groups of teachers in terms of this and that for their teaching behaviors. So each of the interviews lasted around 20 minutes. Okay, so these are some of the findings that we got in relation to teaching style. So we have the questionnaire items here, and for each of the items, we ask the students to rate whether they agree or disagree with this item or statement. So if they strongly agree with this statement, they will rate 4 scores. If they strongly disagree with the statement, they would rate 1 score. Okay, so these are the main scores for each groups of the teachers. And we did some non-parametric statistical analysis to compare the findings or the data of the two groups of teachers. And this is the p-value, and this is the coherence C, that is the effect size. So for the teaching styles of the teachers, the participants reported that they believe ECTs were more interactive or were more likely to interact with them in the EMI classroom. And the ECTs also were more likely to use body language to facilitate the content instruction and include some jokes to create a humorous classroom atmosphere. And generally speaking, ECTs were more energetic and humorous in the EMI class than CCT did. And on the other hand, the CCT might rely more on the blackboard to facilitate their content instruction. And both groups of the teachers adopted multimodal devices in their teaching, and they were strict in the EMI class. So these are some findings that we summarize from the interview to incorporate and supplement the survey results. So in the interviews, The participants mentioned that ECTs were open in their selection of teaching methods, and they encouraged students to ask questions, and they adopted various models and tools to visualize the terminologies in the classroom. Well, in terms of CCTs, very interestingly, the students divided them into two groups depending on whether the teachers had some prior experience of receiving education or working overseas. If the teachers did not have any overseas experience, they might adopt more teacher-dominated approach in the classroom because the students mentioned that their teaching style were rather lecturing and there was no interaction with the students. And one of them even described that kind of teaching style as training instead of teaching. But for those with overseas experience, the students described their teaching approaches as interactive, learner-centered, and interesting. And the second table is about the questionnaire items of content organization. And we may find that both groups of the teachers arrange a very tight schedule of content. In terms of the frequencies of teachers' behaviors of correcting the students' knowledge or language errors, we might find that CCTs were more likely to correct the students' knowledge errors, while ECTs were more likely to correct the students' language errors. And ECTs were also more likely to design group discussions and problem-solving activities and assess students' class participation performance than CCT did. So in the interview, one of the participants mentioned that he preferred ECTs to CCTs because ECTs could organize tutorial sections for them to conduct group works and discuss questions, and the tutorials were rather important for him to understand the content of the lectures. And 6 of them preferred CCTs to ECTs because they believed that CCTs knew Chinese students' learning and thinking style in a better way, and they also introduced both the international and domestic implications of the content knowledge to the students. While the ECTs, they might not be familiar with the Chinese language, Chinese culture, and Chinese market. So sometimes they might not realize that their students were encountering some problems in the learning process. And even they might realize that their students had some problems, they could not help them to solve the problems because they did not know about the first language of the students. And some of the ECTs could not introduce the applications of the content knowledge in the Chinese market. But as what the students mentioned, after graduation, they're going to find jobs in China. So they care a lot about the things happening in the Chinese market, but the ECTs could not offer any knowledge in relation to this aspect. And in terms of the 2 question items in relation to language issues, the participants believe that when they encounter difficulties in understanding their teachers, okay, this kind of scenarios might be more often happen in ECT's classroom. Okay? And there are 2 reasons. First is that their English level was insufficient. And the second is that the ECTs has strong accent and they could not understand. And in terms of EMI effectiveness, the participants mentioned that in the ECT's classrooms, they might have more opportunities to improve their oral English, while in both of the teachers' classroom, they had some chance to improve their academic English. And for question 24, in terms of their preference for the 2 groups of teachers, more than half of them mentioned that they favor both groups of teachers, and around 27% of them preferred CCTs to ECTs. When asking about their reasons, for those who prefer both groups of teachers, they mentioned that, each group has its advantages. But for those who prefer CCTs to ECTs, they explained that CCT's classes were more comprehensible, and they could use Chinese when the students couldn't understand, which greatly improved teaching and learning efficiency. And this students mentioned that in EMI subjects, they believe that content should be prioritized. So they did not want to spend much time dealing with the language issues that they encounter. That's the reason why they prefer CCTs who could help them, or code switch to L1 to help them to tackle those language issues. So these are some of our findings. To summarize the findings, we will find that in terms of students' perceptions of native or non-native EMI teachers, we think that they might not have pre-assumed preferences for these groups of teachers. Instead, they have some criteria for their ideal EMI classroom. And first of all, they would like to have some kind of efficient and interactive EMI classes. And second, they hope their teachers could obtain both intercultural and intercultural competence during the EMI teaching. And we might also find that the students' ideology of EMI courses could influence the shaping of their preferable teaching behaviors of their EMI teachers, because some of them mentioned that they prioritize content learning in just EMI courses. That's the reason why they did not want to spend much time dealing with the language issues or adapting themselves to get used to the action of the ECTs. And some of them also mentioned that nowadays, English might not be quite simple. So we talk about English as a lingua franca or world Englishes. So the students might not care that much about what could be understood as standard English, and they hope they could keep their Chinese identity or Chinese accent in their English, and that's the reason why they would believe that ECT could have some accent that they do not understand. And they even prefer those CCTs who could use Chinese language practices when they encounter language problems to help them to tackle their difficulties and enhance the efficiency of teaching and learning. But at the same time, they also prefer ECTs because the ECTs were more likely to organize some tutorials and after-class discussions which could facilitate their learning. So some pedagogical implications we can draw from the data on developing teacher expertise. First, bringing in the EFF context like China, EMI teachers may make efforts to develop a better understanding of the students' culture and language, and they could also communicate with them to appreciate their learning experience and needs. Second, the teachers with different linguistic and cultural backgrounds may exchange their experiences and teaching approaches with each other so that they can incorporate different kinds of teaching styles, different kinds of teaching approaches to optimize the effects of EMI teaching. And lastly, in addition to content knowledge, maybe EMI teachers could equip themselves with English teaching skills to help the students to tackle their language barriers during the learning process. So this would be something that I would like to share with you today. Thank you so much for your attention.